Chapter 19. Vegas Nights. We rode from California to Vegas, 40 cars deep. We were on our way to the Tyson fight. Right before we crossed the state line, we stopped at a restaurant. Some college dudes at the restaurant started talking crazy to Pac on some gangbanging shit. They had no idea that there were a bunch of the homies outside. When one of the dudes came out of the restaurant, the homies rolled up on him. It was like a scene from an action movie. People were being knocked into their places for talking crazy to Pac. After the chaos, we all jumped in our cars and continued on our trip. When we were about 2 hours away, one of the producers, Damon Thomas, had an accident and flipped his Viper over 7 times. With so many cars in the caravan, we had no clue about the accident until we made it to Vegas. When we got to Vegas, we checked into the Luxor Hotel. Later on that day, we went to one of the other hotels to gamble. When we were on our way out, Pac noticed one of the guys that had tried to get his chain from one of the homies. His name was Orlando Anderson. Puffy had a bounty out for Deathrow medallions, and he was paying $75,000. The would-be thieves knew that they were going to have to hurt or kill someone in order to get the chain. When Orlando realized that we knew who he was, he tried to run. That's when all hell broke loose. The fight was so big, and people were running from everywhere. The security guards ran toward us deep as hell, but they were too scared to come close to us. We rushed the exit and left the building. When we made it back to the hotel, we got dressed to head out to the strip. It was always the best part of the trip. We would all dress up. It was like Suge was Tony Soprano, and we were his guys. I was almost dressed when Suge asked me to meet him and Pac downstairs. I got on the elevator thinking I was clean as hell, but as soon as I got off, one of the hotel staff told me that there was something on the back of my pants. When I looked down, I couldn't tell if it was ketchup, hot sauce, coffee, or what. It was everywhere. I told Suge that I needed to get some more clothes. I didn't want it looking like I had shitted on myself. Suge told me that I had better run over to the mall and grab something and then meet them at the fight. I took a cab over to the mall, but everything was closing early. I happened to find a store where I was able to replace my pants, but the problem was, their seamstress had already left for the day. I was always clean. There was no way I was showing up with unhemmed pants. I took a page out of the grandmother's playbook and ran to Woolworths to get some fabric tape. I went back to the room and ironed my pants. When I was done, they looked like they had been custom tailored. When I got in the car, I called Suge. He said to me, "Shit, you might as well go straight to the club. Tyson knocked this fool out in 1 round." When I arrived at Club 662, it was cracking. All of the A-listers were there. It was where Tyson came to party. People came out to Vegas just to come to Club 662, even if they didn't have tickets to the fight. I had been at the club for about 2 hours when one of the homies came in and said, "Suge and Pac just got smoked on the strip." I was tripping out. I immediately went into panic mode. Security was all over me trying to see where I was going. They were watching my every move. When we got down to the strip, it was very crowded. People were everywhere. One of the homies chirped us and told us that they were at the University Medical Center. Someone said that they had been killed. "They just been shot, they straight," another homie said. I didn't know what to believe. Suge was a father to me, and Pac was like a brother. I was inconsolable. My mind was on getting to the hospital. I had to see them for myself. When I got there, everyone was in the emergency room. I was shaking and crying. I can't explain the feeling I had. I thought they were dead. We waited at the hospital until late into the night. Suge fared better than Pac. He ended up signing himself out of the hospital after suffering a graze to his head. Pac was in bad shape. When Suge went into Pac's room and saw him on life support, I think he went into shock. It was a lot to take in. He was lost for words. His eyes were different. He was lost. Everyone left the hospital for the night and went back to the hotel. When we got back to the house in Vegas, Suge wanted everyone to leave. He wanted to be alone. Tupac was like a little brother to Suge too. Ever since his release from jail, we had been inseparable. I was scared. I had been acting like this grown-ass man, but I was still a kid. I thought we were untouchable. Suge was like Superman to me. And now he was falling apart, I was falling apart, and Pac was on his deathbed. We were just together laughing like we always would. All this flashed into my mind as I prayed for a miracle. I remembered how I would always try to beat Pac to the car whenever we were about to roll out somewhere. This dude and I used to play shotgun. Whoever got there first would get the front seat. Pac always won. I would have to sit behind him because nobody could sit behind Suge. At the hospital, the reporters and paparazzi were in full force. It seemed that they would do anything to get a story. They wanted the story so bad that they sent in young kids to listen and write about what was going on. Everyone in the camp had to become security at that point because we had to be sure that no one would be able to breach our security. We were sure to protect Pac against anyone who might want to bring more harm to him. We had to put people out left and right. Pac was drifting away, but you couldn't even tell it because Pac was a fighter. We expected him to pull through. None of us could imagine life or death row without Pac. As the days went by, people would call in threats to the hospital. They would say things like they knew where his bed was and that they were going to come and finish the job. We ended up parking a U-Haul truck on the side of his room just to give him some kind of protection. He was on life support and could not be moved. We would take turns walking around the hospital, and if anything looked suspicious, we were on top of it. Sometimes we would gather around Pac's mother and pray. One of those times, his mom asked me to sing. I sang one of the songs that he always liked to hear me sing. I was born by the river, in a little tent. Just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. As I was singing, tears rolled down his face. I knew he had heard me. He knew that we were there in the room with him. When we would ask Pac if he knew who we were, he would kick his feet, but perhaps it was our imagination. We wanted him to survive, but he was drifting away. We prayed and cried and cried and prayed. His mother was one of the strongest women I'd ever met. She would just smile and pray. "My baby's gonna be all right," she'd say. On Pac's 5th day in the hospital, I went to pray for him. As I prayed and sang in his ear, he again shook his feet. I still had hope. I thought Pac was gonna be okay. I stayed with him till the early morning. Friday the 13th, I was sleeping in my room at the Luxor Hotel after being at the hospital all night. I was awakened to the sound of hotel security and one of the homies banging on my door. It had to be about 5 o'clock in the morning. I opened my door in a panic. Pac was gone. I ran down to valet, and as soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, the radio station played. I shed so many tears. The fans were crying, the DJ was crying, I was crying, but I was still in doubt. Pac can't be dead, I thought. When I pulled up at the hospital and saw thousands of people crying and holding up signs, I knew it was real. I jumped out in the middle of the street with the car still in drive. When I got to the door, the nurse was standing there waiting. "I'm sorry about Mr. Shakur, and sorry for your loss," she said. I fell right to the floor. Security picked me up and took me back to the hotel where everyone was meeting. It felt like the world was standing still. Everyone was in a daze. We were sitting around talking about arrangements when Afeni said, "I don't want nobody standing over him." She paced the floor back and forth for a while, and then she stopped. "Go on, Peacock. Spread your wings," she said. I can still hear her voice. Afeni turned to us and said that she would make arrangements for Tupac to be cremated. I instantly threw up all over the floor where Soog was standing. It literally made me sick to my stomach to know that my brother's body would be cremated. I felt like Pac would have wanted his service to be like a concert. That's what the lyrics said. "Have a party at my funeral. Let every rapper rock it." "Man, you know we have to go with what she wants," Soog said. Soog still didn't want to be around anybody. He had completely shut down. It was another one of the saddest days in entertainment history. A few days after Pac's urn was delivered, the video director of I Ain't Mad at Cha sent Soog a version of the video. No one had ever seen the video besides the editors, not even Pac. I was sitting there watching this video, where we were acting like we were in heaven. In the video, the Red Fox lookalike spoke to Tupac, saying, "Man, I've been struggling trying to get in here a long time. You're gonna have to earn your way. I sure hope you can make it." At this point, I was just coming into adulthood. I was signed to a label called Deathrow, and acting in a video where I'm acting out life after death. To know that Pac was gone, and that I was pretty much the only person in the video living, it felt like a premonition. I had been too close to death to not see the connection. I was supposed to be in the car that night. Had it not been for the grace of God, I might have been shot down too. The things we speak, what we name ourselves, we have to live under. I began to wonder if I was serving a sentence. None of the artists from the label came to Vegas to show their respects, and the ones that were there swiftly returned to Cali. I think Tupac's death scared the shit out of everybody. Sugi and I stayed in Vegas for about a week longer. During that time, I only saw him once or twice. When I did see him, all we could do was cry and talk about Pac. We were left with so many questions. We didn't know how we could move on. or if we'd ever recover. Serving time on death row was getting harder with Pac gone. It seemed like we were falling apart. When we left Vegas, we went back to LA for a while. After Pac was killed, people were bolder. Death row was no longer untouchable. We started getting threats, so Suge moved me to Michelle's old place in Calabasas. Not long after the move, Suge had us fly to Compass Point, Bahamas, to wrap up the Christmas on Death Row album. We were trying to get things back moving in the right direction, but it seemed like everything was working against us. Being in the Bahamas provided only a brief distraction from the hurt, heartache, and agony that was still lingering. Back in the States, they were investigating Suge for allegedly stomping the guy that he was in an altercation with at the hotel. They never questioned Orlando Anderson about his whereabouts during the shooting. They overlooked all of that and did everything that they could to prosecute Suge. To me, it didn't seem like they had any validity, but they definitely made their case. While we were in the Bahamas, I woke up one day and realized that I couldn't get up. I couldn't get out of bed. For weeks, I was seeing a back specialist there. After about a month in the Bahamas, I was still experiencing back pains, and I was being pushed around in a wheelchair. I had to have people help me get in and out of the shower. I was almost helpless. The pain was becoming unbearable. Suge came into the studio one day and saw me lying down in the booth recording the Christmas song. He immediately told everyone to take the rest of the night off. Suge, his barber Reggie Lamb, and I went back to the house that Suge was renting while we were there. Suge's house was on the ocean. Hoping that the salt water would heal my back, we went out for a soak. There were these large rocks in the water that protected us from the sharks that swam on the other side. We drank liquor until everyone was pissy drunk. And then we prayed. We prayed to God all night long. There was a Muslim guy there who even prayed to God in Arabic. Suge had a lot of things facing him. That night in the water was the last time we talked like that. The next day, Suge came by the studio and gave me his death row chain, which was worth more than everyone's chains together. He took it off, put it around my neck, and told me to hold it down. When he left the studio, I thought he was going to the villa, but about an hour later, Kevin Lewis called a meeting. He asked me to pray before he began to talk. Kevin told us that Suge was on his way back to LA to turn himself in. There had been a warrant issued for his arrest. They made sure that he was gone and on the plane before they told me, because Suge didn't want me to know what was going on. We stayed at Compass Point for another week. Suge was all over the news. Early one morning, the police came into the studio and told us that we had to leave. They escorted us to the van without giving us a chance to go back and retrieve our belongings. They wanted us to go directly from the studio to the airport. And that's what we did. We left behind our clothes, shoes, and personal items. All we knew was that they no longer wanted us there. I was still having problems moving and was still in a wheelchair. Reggie Lamb had to push me around everywhere. We flew into Miami, but were stranded there because there had just been a hurricane. We had to sleep in the airport that night. My back pain was so bad that I cried all night long. As soon as we got back to LA, I went to the hospital. I had no feeling in my legs. I was basically paralyzed. I couldn't get out of bed. I needed help using the bathroom and doing the things I was used to doing on my own. I had been in the hospital for 2 months and hadn't heard anything from Suge. I was in therapy, working to get better before my birthday arrived. I would tell the doctor that I was okay, even though I was still in pain. It was weird not to hear from Suge, because we normally talked every day. He was in prison, but it was not like him to cease all communication. At the least, he would send a message through someone else. But there were no messages, no notes, and no phone calls. I knew that he had been in communication with someone, but I couldn't understand why he wouldn't talk to me. When he gave me his chain, it felt like a father-son moment. But at this point, I didn't know what to think. His people were telling me that he couldn't have visitors, and that he had no phone calls. I believed them. I was naive. When I was discharged from the hospital on October 30th, I still hoped that Suge would find a way to talk to me. Even though I hadn't talked to Suge, I was still thinking about how the police had hemmed him up. I didn't understand why they would go to so much trouble to lock him up for allegedly stomping on some guy when Tupac's killer was free. I'd seen a lot of movies, and they led me to believe that when people were involved in an altercation, and later one of them is hurt or dies, they investigate all parties involved. Orlando Anderson would have been number 1 on my list. They went all around that point and arrested Suge for the fight, but never arrested anyone for the murder of Tupac. I think the authorities had it out for Suge. He could be a pain in the ass. The fact that he had millions behind him only further exacerbated things. This was the beginning of niggas having money outside of sports. It was new, and I think it made them nervous. Suge had money, and he had power. and they wanted him off the streets. They were more focused on taking him down than solving Pac's murder. It was a tough time for me. Our chain was broken. I had lost both Tupac and Suge.